Hello out there, everyone. I want to touch on a verse here in Isaiah 5:14. There's a certain phrase here that it kind of throws people off, and I want to see if I can bring it out just by using the verses here in the same chapter. Once again, this is Isaiah 5:14, and it reads like this: Therefore hell hath enlarged herself and opened her mouth without measure, and their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he that rejoiceth shall descend into it. So if you just take this verse all by itself, it seems to imply something that it's not really saying here. And I know I've covered this in another one of my videos, but the word hell specifically in the Old Testament, it comes from the word Sheol, Sheol, and it is translated into the English word hell, grave, or pit, but it all comes from the same Hebrew word. And what it means is, in each one of those instances, it's typically talking about a figurative grave, a natural grave, or a condition of suffering. So with that being said, I want to go back up in this verse and find out why he uses the phrase, hell hath enlarged herself. So we're going to go back up to verse 1 and find out what this chapter is talking about. Because if you leave the verse in the chapter that it was written and in the context that it was written, it'll make a whole lot more sense, and it'll keep your imagination, let's say it like that, from carrying you away off into fairy tales and things like that. So in verse 1 he says, Now will I sing to my beloved a song of my beloved, touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard and a very fruitful hill. So my beloved is talking about God, and the vineyard is talking about the nation of Israel. And he'll go down here in the next number of verses, and it'll show that. It says in verse 2, He fenced it and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem, and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, betwixt me and my vineyard. So right there he's saying that he's talking about the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Verse 4, What could have been done more to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Wherefore, when I looked that it should bring forth grapes or fruit, brought it forth wild grapes. So this is talking about, what more could God have done to set up and bless and give the nation of Israel at this time that this was written? What more could he have done to bless them? But we know, because of the history that we see in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel went into conditions where they were very rebellious, they were very disobedient to God, and what he would do, you can see this in Isaiah 10, where he talks about Assyria, that he was going to use as an axe. He called the nation of Assyria an axe that he was going to use to punish his people Israel for their sin. So what he would do is he would use these Gentile nations, he would use famines, he would use pestilence and things to try to get his people back on the straight and narrow, because they were constantly rebelling against him. So that's the setting here. In verse 5, Isaiah 5:5, And now go to, I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, or the protection, and it shall be eaten up, and I'll break down the wall thereof, and it shall be trodden down. So I'm taking my hands off it. I'm going to allow these nations to come in and punish them and harm them, to try to get them to repent and turn back to me. So go down, skip down here to verse 9. In mine ears, said the Lord of hosts, of a truth many houses shall be desolate, even great and fair, without inhabitant. Yea, even 10 acres of vineyard shall yield one bath, and the seed of an homer shall yield an ephah. Woe unto them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, until wine inflame them. Verse 12, and the harp and the viol, the tabret, the pipe, the wine are in their feasts, but they, listen to this phrase right here, they regard not the work of the Lord, neither consider the operation of his hands. So this is what this kind of attitude they had and what they were doing is why the Lord had to give them a spanking. So this is the context. This is the setting. There's no mystical fairy tales here. There's no fire burning chasm that God's going to open up in the earth here. And then in verse 13, therefore, or because they didn't consider the operation of his hands or regard his work, they rebelled against him. And verse 13, therefore, or because of this, my people are gone into captivity. I'm going to send you captive. I'm going to make you prisoners and captives to Gentile nations, because they have no knowledge, and their honorable men are famished, their multitude dried up with thirst. Therefore, or because of this, hell hath enlarged herself and opened her mouth without measure. Their glory, Israel's glory, their multitude, their pomp, and he that rejoiceth shall descend, or go down into this condition of suffering. So at the beginning of verse 14, when he says, therefore hell hath enlarged herself, he's really saying the same thing that he's saying at the beginning of verse 13. Remember the context. Therefore my people are gone into captivity. They're going into a place of famine, of suffering, of captivity, of punishment for their rebellion. So that should make a lot more sense when you leave this verse in the context that it was written. Don't let your imagination get carried away when you see the phrase, and you'll see this repeated all through the Old and New Testament. Hell hath enlarged herself. He's talking about a condition of suffering that he brought on his people to try to turn them away from their sins. God bless you.